Hello there everyone, how are you doing today? Today we will be reading a story from Cryptic Wander, who was nice enough to give me permission to read it. The story is called Less Than Nothing, and the story will be in the description below. Please check it out if you enjoy this. And without further ado, let's get started. The sun set quickly across the sky, casting a blood-red hue that only fall can give. The moon that rose in its place gave everything an otherworldly feel. Snaps of cold wind blew through the trees, shaking the dead leaves like a giant maraca. Skeletons, ghosts, and all sorts of creatures happily skipped through the streets, swinging their bags of candy without a care. James envied these children as they celebrated Halloween, full of excitement and wonder, as children should be. His son was not among them. Soon, he whispered under his breath. He made his way towards the outskirts of the town, passing by more children as they laughed and chatted. It served as a reminder of what he had lost, stinging his heart again and again. Thankfully, they began to thin out as he approached his destination. The wrought iron gate came into view, growing taller as he came closer. With the light of the moon, he could make out the landscape beyond as if it was trying to hide from the world. It was a dreadful place, and silhouettes both short and long stood in odd intervals. Their imposing shadows stretched out across the grass, making him feel very unwelcome. The moon climbed higher, ever higher. He got to the cemetery gate. He could hear a dog barking off in the distance as he looked at the padlock that held fast a thick line of chain. It would be sought-out destination for the older kids in town this night, so he wasn't too surprised to find it locked. He hoped to God there wouldn't be any here tonight. He needed to be alone, otherwise he might not have another chance. James made his way down the sidewalk, trying to find another way in. The bars of the fence eventually turning into a wall of stone and mortar. It was still high, but he leapt up and was able to grab a hold of the top. James wasn't completely out of shape, but even still he struggled to pull himself up. His feet scraped against the side and began to find purchase when he heard the excited talking coming a ways down the road. A group of teenagers were loudly going on about their evening as they made their way toward where he was. In a surge of desperation, he scraped the underside of his forearms as he finally made his way up and over the side. He landed hard on the ground, just missing a small marker that stood only a foot or two away from his head. He breathed a sigh of relief as the group of voices came and went, leaving James unnoticed. He got up, dusted himself off, and turned his gaze to the land of the dead. He knew the cemetery well enough, as it was only yesterday he said goodbyes to his son at his funeral. At night, when the shadows took over, however, the entire place took on an alien appearance. The tree branches clacked together, adding to the odd sounds that rose in the distance. Cold fear coursed through him as he took in the view. Taking another deep breath, he steeled himself for what was to come. He had to get this done, and nothing was going to stop him. He faced forward with his mind on his task, and walked between the stones with as much confidence as he could muster. Eventually, he got his bearings when he saw the large paved road that had a shed at the turn. He made his way past and continued as the guard began to rise. Off in the distance there came a sound, a clacking from the road ahead of him that was rapidly coming closer. He didn't have a weapon of any kind, and he braced himself to kick whatever it was. Then he was surprised to find a large dog. It stopped a few feet away and gave a sad whimper. His heart nearly leapt out of his chest, and he once again composed himself. "Psst, get lost," he whispered harshly. It gave him a sideways look and walked back towards the shack. James shook his head and continued on. Nearly at the crest of the hill, he looked off to the left and saw the large stone building his son lay in. He walked over to the stone steps, slowing down to get a grip on his thoughts and feelings. It was a moment of reverence, as happy memories of his boy came to mind. Those feelings then soured, and tears began to fall from his cheeks. Those thoughts turned to the ruined remains he was forced to look upon the day Nathan was found. His son walked home from school, as he only lived 9 blocks away. When he never showed up, James called the police to report him missing, and it was a few days later his body was found. It was stuffed behind some bricks at a construction site outside of town. He was clearly murdered, and he was so horribly mutilated that James couldn't clearly identify him without dental records. Skin was slashed and torn. His face had been caved in, most likely from the large chunk of bloody concrete found close by. It was a closed casket funeral, and having lost his wife to an aneurysm 5 years prior, the attendance was small. It was at the funeral the odd man approached him. He was dressed in a large gray coat and a wide brim hat that sat atop a head full of gray hair. He seemed to keep to himself as Nathan's coffin was placed onto his tomb. The entrance was sealed, and what few friends and family came began to shuffle out. It was just James and that man. James began to walk out as well, pulling out a pack of cigarettes to light one. He pat his pockets and sighed in annoyance that he forgot to bring a lighter. The man picked up on this and approached, handing him a buck of matches. "I am truly sorry for your loss," he said. Lost in his grief, James just made a quick nod and thanked him as he sparked one of the sticks. Always sad when a father outlives his child. But it doesn't have to be that way. Please, I don't know who you are, but can you just leave? Replied James. In time I shall. However, first, I must insist you hear me out. There is a way for your son to come back. James creased his eyebrows at this. Clearly the man was insane, and his nonsense was quickly getting on his nerves. I think you better just go. Who are you anyway? What possible reason could you have for being at my son's funeral? Why, I am a friend, Mr. Monroe. You may call me Nick. I am offering you the chance of a lifetime. Tomorrow it will be Halloween, and the veil between the living and the dead will be at its thinnest. That is the only chance you will have. The instructions are here on this card, Nick said, offering it to him between two gloved fingers. Follow these instructions precisely, and you can have your boy back. And I do mean precisely. James looked the purple card over and scoffed, letting it drop to the stone steps outside the mausoleum. Again, I urge you, do them to the letter, or things could go horribly wrong. That is all, Mr. Monroe. Good day, said the man as he tipped his hat and walked off. James picked the card back up as he left. Of course it was stupid, and entertaining the idea made him even angrier as the day went forward. However, he found himself fantasizing about its success while turning it over and over. What if, he wondered. He missed Nathan terribly, and would give anything to have him back. When Halloween came the following day, he felt he had no other choice. So, here he was, standing in front of the great stone building. The door was locked as well, but the chain was snapped easily enough, as it was no bigger than a necklace. He opened the door and almost lost his balance when he saw how dark it was inside. It was as if he opened a void that would swallow him up, like he never existed. He took a breath and stepped inside. Each footstep echoed through the place of rest, loud enough to wake the dead, he thought. He made his way toward the back, where the light of the moon shone through the skylight above, and stood in front of the stone seal that had his son's name. After running a hand down the sandblasted letters, he wrapped the tips of his fingers around the sides and began to pull. The sealing putty hadn't yet hardened and wouldn't for another few months. Even still, the airtight vacuum made it a slow task. His joints ached, but after a few moments it slowly gave, and the seal was broken. The slab fell to the floor with a resounding shatter of stone, and he looked into the dark tomb where Nathan's coffin sat. It was heavy, but he managed to pull it out with some effort, and guided it to the floor as gently as possible. After unsnapping the locks to the lid, he pulled it up. And there was the destroyed face of his son. The skin was glued back as well as it could be. However, large amounts of bone still glistened through the moonlight. Tears formed once more, making it difficult to read. But he looked at the card and read the instructions once more. Place 5 candles around the body in a star fashion and light them. 2. Anoint the head with oil. And 3. Place your hand upon the chest and recite these words. It was a hard process for him. The oil made Nathan's tattered skin come loose, and the feeling around his fingers made James queasy. Using the matches Nick provided him, he lit the candles one after the other and cleared his throat. As he began to speak, the door out front banged against the wall, making him jump. He looked to the left, not sure what to expect, and the dog from earlier made his way up to him. "Git!" he yelled, making the dog smack to the leg. It whimpered and strolled over to the corner where it curled and sat. The eyes of the dog on him made him feel guilty, like he was some sort of monster. He put it out of his mind and continued his morbid task. Permitto legion a capere audium filii mai, nemo sit in terra, illum et obscurum interfaciens. The odd words rang throughout the empty building, and at first nothing happened. James looked fearfully at his own dead son's body, hoping it would, and that it wouldn't, rise. More silence filled the space, and he threw the card across the room. Disappointment and anger began to creep in. He was close to completely losing it when he heard a crackling sound. It was something like water when it rapidly froze. And then a violent explosion erupted in front of him. As if the air itself was ripped open, a blue window to somewhere else was present. Through the window he could make out a forest of dead-looking trees, and, yes, the face of a child. It was Nathan. The air around him blew harshly, and a tall figure walked in from the entrance. It was Nick from the funeral, still wearing his heavy coat and wide-brimmed hat. James couldn't see as he squinted. Nick's deep voice boomed out. "Mr. Monroe, I must thank you for all of your work." "What is this? How do I get my son out of there?" he yelled back. His face remained hidden, but his eyes began to glow bright red of an electric burner. The man walked forward and bent down to stroke what remained of the boy's cheek. Once more he rose to his feet, then lifted a hand to the portal. "This is the gateway to purgatory. When a person dies, their soul goes here and is judged on its way to their final destination. Only a human is able to open the door." "So if I walk through, I can get to Nathan?" "Presumably, yes. However, you were never opening it for yourself, and I doubt you'd survive the terrors that call it home." "What do you mean?" "You should really brush up on your Latin, Mr. Monroe. What I mean is, without the guidance of God to protect you, the evil that dwells in purgatory's dark reaches will rip you apart and drag you to hell. Normally a child his age is automatically brought to heaven's gate, and as the Bible says, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. However, when you read the words from that card as his parent and guardian, you gave me full access to his soul." "You son of a bitch! Who are you really?" He began to chuckle, and the tone rapidly dipping down multiple octaves. The coat he wore burst open, and the leathery wings spread out. The hat fell to the ground as the large horns of a ram pushed out of his skull and curved. His already large body seemed to double in size, and before him stood a demon whose appearance was straight out of a Renaissance painting. "I couldn't have done it without you. I no longer have need of you. However, you can join your son in everlasting torment," he growled. The demon made his way toward him on unnaturally long legs, and James had a thought. "Can I at least enjoy one last smoke?" he asked, pulling out his pack. The demon seemed to enjoy the triviality of it all, and stopped. James lit up a match, then lit the rest of the book. The demon growled, but before he could pounce, James threw the flaming book onto his son's body, which quickly became engulfed in flames. "No!" it hissed, but it was too late, and the portal that was there began to vanish. James was able to catch one last glance of his son, and the demon was on him. It crushed his body with its massive fists and ripped at his flesh with sharp claws. The dog had taken its place in the corner, got up, and made a beeline for the demon, taking its forearm into its teeth. The demon threw off the dog with ease and landed on the other side of the portal. Blood was pouring out of James' body, but he smiled through the pain, knowing his son would be okay. "Don't look so smug, you pig. I may not be able to take him, but he still has no protection. There are many others that will happily rip him to pieces again and again." And then the light from James' eyes faded, and James let out his final breath. What a man, knowing he screwed up and did what was necessary to protect his kin. Let's salute him down in the comments. Type down, "I salute." And I'll see you later. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, it helps the channel a lot. See you next time.